This is Jocko Podcast number 106 with Echo Charles and me, Jocko Willink. Good evening, Echo.
Good evening.
Now, in podcast 105, we finished just as the 1-7 Cav flew out of the Idrang Valley after keeping it together during a vicious 3-day fight where they suffered some massive casualties, 79 killed in action, 121 wounded, and on top of that, the battlefield was littered with enemy dead, with the estimates of enemy dead to be between 500 and 1,000. And we stopped there where the 1-7 Cav left the battlefield. So if you haven't listened to 105 yet, go back and listen to that before continuing with this podcast 106, because even though the 1-7 left the battlefield, the battle wasn't over yet. And one of the events that I didn't really talk about in the first Idrang podcast on 105 was the fact that 2 other battalions had arrived on the ground to reinforce the 1-7, and it was the 2nd Battalion, 5th Cavalry, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Robert Tully, and the 2nd Battalion, 7th Cavalry, led by Lieutenant Colonel Robert McDade. Now, most of the battalion's men from those 2 battalions had landed at LZ Victor, which was about 2 miles away from Xray, and they had patrolled to Xray on foot, arriving for the most part without incident, and then things seemed to settle down a lot on Xray. 1-7 left, and once 1-7 had left the battlefield, 2-7 and 2-5 were still there. So at that point, that portion of the battle was over, and 2-7 and 2-5 could have likely been extracted via helicopter pretty securely, just as 1-7 had been. It seems that General Westmoreland did not like the idea of 2-7 and 2-5 pulling out. He thought that would appear as a retreat. So he ordered that 2-5 and 2-7 secure LZ Xray for the night, and then the next day they would move by foot patrol to another LZ called LZ Albany, which was about 2.5 miles to the north, and then B-52 bombers were going to rain down bombs on LZ Xray and the surrounding areas. They didn't expect a lot of resistance because things had settled so much on LZ Xray that, if you remember, even towards the end of the last podcast, there was reporters came in and landed at LZ Xray and were doing camera shots and interviewing people. So it was pretty settled down. They felt like it was over, and they didn't expect much resistance on this movement from LZ Xray to LZ Albany.